Every morning, just after the sun peeked over the buildings and the city yawned into another day, Anna walked the same path to work. She was not someone who sought attention. Her clothes were always neat but simple, her hair tied back in a way that said she had more important things to do than stand in front of a mirror. She passed the bakery on 7th and Main, and there, tucked just to the side near a faded brick wall, was the same figure. Quiet, still, forgotten by the world. He was always there. A man folded into himself, like he was trying to disappear. His coat was too thin for winter, too torn to offer any real protection. His shoes had holes where the soles used to be. His hands trembled slightly when he lifted them to his face. And his eyes, those were the hardest part. They were not angry. They were not even sad. They were tired. Deep, soul-worn tired. Like someone who had lived through too much and expected nothing more from anyone. Most people walked past without a glance. Some crossed the street early. Others glanced at him only to quickly look away, as if acknowledging him would invite a burden they were not willing to carry. But Anna looked, not the kind of look that people give out of pity or fear. Hers was different. It was soft. It was full. And above all, it was human. The first time she brought him food, it was not planned. She had bought 2 sandwiches at the bakery by mistake. Or at least, that was what she told herself. She had seen him sitting there all week. Something in her gut had tugged at her that morning. She walked over slowly, cautiously, and handed him the brown paper bag. He did not look up at first. She placed the bag on the step beside him and said, "It is warm. You should eat it while it still is." He did not answer, just sat there as if unsure whether the gesture was real. Anna walked away. The next day, she did it again. This time she brought a bottle of water with it. She still said nothing more than a few kind words. She never sat with him, never asked his name, never pried into who he was or how he had ended up on that corner. She just handed him the bag, smiled softly, and kept walking. Then she did it again, and again, and again. Every morning, without fail, she brought that same brown paper bag. Inside was always something warm, something fresh. A sandwich, sometimes a pastry, a piece of fruit when she could. There was always water, sometimes a napkin. Once, even a pair of wool socks folded neatly beside the sandwich. Weeks turned into months. Seasons came and went. Still, her routine never changed. She walked past dozens of people on her way to work. Office workers, shopkeepers, baristas, and bus drivers. Most of them looked at their phones. No one noticed the quiet exchange that happened on that corner each day. No one, except the man on the step, and Anna. Over time, something shifted. The first time he looked her in the eye, it lasted only a second, but it happened. The next week he said 2 words that caught her by surprise. "Thank you." His voice was rough, dry like paper, but it carried something real. Something like dignity, buried beneath layers of dirt and time. She smiled, as always, and replied gently, "You are welcome." As the days passed, he began to greet her with a nod. Once she thought she saw him try to straighten his coat before she arrived. It was not much, but it mattered. Anna noticed other things too. He had stopped shaking as much. His hands were still rough, but he seemed to hold the bag with more care. His eyes were not quite as hollow. There were moments, fleeting, fragile moments, when he almost looked like he remembered how to be part of the world. She never spoke about him to anyone, not even her fiancé Daniel. It was not a secret, but it felt private, sacred in a way. This small act of kindness that asked for nothing in return. Some mornings were hard. She overslept. The bakery ran out of bread. The sky poured cold rain that soaked her clothes. But she still went. She still brought the bag. She still smiled. She knew better than to ask about his life. Sometimes people are not ready to share their pain. Sometimes all you can do is show up. Sometimes that is enough. But one day something inside her stirred. She wanted him to know that if he ever needed more than a sandwich, more than a bottle of water, she would be there. So she wrote a note, just a short one. She folded it carefully and slipped it inside the bag. It said, "If you ever need help, I will be here." She did not sign it. She did not mention it when she handed him the bag that morning. She just left it there, tucked beside the apple and wrapped sandwich, and walked away. That day, he opened the bag slowly. His fingers paused when they touched the paper. He unfolded the note. Read it. Held it for a long while. Then he folded it again, tucked it into the inner pocket of his coat, and looked up. She had already turned the corner. She never asked if he read it. He never mentioned it. But after that day, his nod was deeper. His thank you was firmer. And once, just once, he looked at her as if he wanted to say something more. But he did not. He just watched her walk away, holding the brown bag in his lap like it was something precious. And the next morning, he was still there, waiting. Life continued. People rushed past, cars honked, phones rang. But on that one corner, at that one moment each day, something gentle happened. A quiet kindness in a world too noisy to notice. Anna never needed recognition. She never expected change. But something told her that the man on the step was changing, little by little, like a spark beneath the ashes, trying to find its way back to flame. What she did not know was that this small gesture, this daily gift of food and dignity, was doing far more than feeding his hunger. It was stitching together the broken pieces of a man the world had thrown away. And even though he never said more than a handful of words, and even though she never asked his story, something passed between them each morning. A trust, a quiet bond, a promise written not in ink but in action. Anna had no idea what that promise would become, but the man in the coat, the one with tired eyes and trembling hands, knew exactly what she had given him, and he was waiting for the day he could repay it. Winter arrived without apology. The wind turned sharp like a knife that scraped against skin, and the sidewalks became layered with ice. People hurried more, heads down, collars turned up, faces hidden beneath scarves and cold breath. Anna, wrapped in her long gray coat, clutched the brown paper bag tightly to her chest as she turned the corner. But the space beside the bakery, the space that had once quietly held a presence every single morning, was empty. The bench sat bare. The bricks behind it were darker than usual, stained with melted snow. The man with the tired eyes and trembling hands was gone. At first, she thought he might be late. Maybe he had gone somewhere to get warm. Maybe someone had offered him a ride, a blanket, a place to rest for once. But as the days turned into weeks, and then those weeks turned into over a month, Anna realized he was not coming back. Something had shifted, something final. The city had swallowed him again. She still brought the brown bag. For nearly 3 more weeks, she walked to the bench every morning and placed it gently on the edge. No one touched it. No one looked. It sat there, quiet and unclaimed, until the afternoon sun began to fall. Then it disappeared. Whether taken by someone else or tossed by a worker who had grown used to trashing the forgotten, She never knew, but she kept bringing it anyway, for the off chance that he would return, for the hope that he might still be alive, for the small voice in her heart that whispered, "You cannot just stop now." Anna asked around. She spoke to the bakery owner, to the barista at the cafe 2 doors down, even to the woman who ran the newsstand across the street. None of them knew his name. Most did not even remember what he looked like. One man simply shrugged and said, "There are always people like that around here, they come and go." But Anna knew he had not just been one of them, he had been someone with a history, with pain, with moments of quiet dignity that most people never took the time to see. She walked by the local shelter, pretending to browse the bulletin board in case there was a note, a message, any sign of where he might have gone. Nothing. It was as though the earth had opened and swallowed him whole. And so, life slowly moved forward. Anna's routine remained the same, but it had lost something. Each morning now felt quieter, like a page missing from a book you had read too many times. She still stopped by the bakery. She still walked the same path to work. But the connection that once existed in that 5-minute moment had vanished, and in its absence was a hollow silence that stretched far longer than it should have. Months passed. Spring came with its false promises and hopeful skies. The snow melted, the sun returned, and the streets filled again with color and movement. But that bench never filled again. No one ever sat there. It remained untouched, as though it had been claimed by memory alone. Anna threw herself into other things. She focused more on her job. She spent weekends with her friends. She got engaged. Daniel, the man who had loved her quietly for 3 years, finally proposed one evening under a canopy of soft white lights. It was a beautiful moment, real, earned. But even as she smiled and said yes, a small shadow passed behind her eyes. Not because she did not love Daniel. She did, deeply, but because there was someone out there who had once looked at her with gratitude that ran deeper than words. And she had never learned his name, never asked, never said goodbye. And then, one morning, everything changed. It was an ordinary Tuesday, the kind where nothing should have happened, the kind where the world seemed flat and unremarkable. Anna stopped at the bakery like always. She ordered a coffee, tucked a croissant into her purse, and stepped outside to head to work. As she adjusted her scarf, a voice caught her attention. "Excuse me, ma'am." She turned, startled slightly. A young man stood in front of her. He was dressed in military uniform, sharp, clean, polished down to the crease in his trousers. He was tall, maybe early 20s, with close-cropped hair and eyes that carried weight beyond his years. "Are you Anna?" he asked. She nodded, unsure of what this was about. "I was told to find you," he said. "A man asked me to." Her heartbeat stuttered. She stared at him, trying to steady her voice. "Who?" "He said you gave him food," the young man replied. "For a long time, on this street, by that bench." She swallowed hard. "I did. I used to." But he disappeared. The young Marine nodded. His hand stayed behind his back, his posture perfect, but his voice softened. He did not disappear. He left, on purpose. He went back. Anna blinked. "Back where?" The Marine took a deep breath, his voice steady. "He was one of us, a long time ago. A Marine. But things went dark for him. He lost his way. Until you." Her hand covered her mouth, trembling. "He told us about you." The man continued. "Said there was a woman who brought him food every day. Said you never asked questions, never looked down on him, just showed up. Anna felt the cold edge of the morning wind bite at her cheeks, but she stood frozen. He said you reminded him who he was, the young Marine finished. And because of that, he got help, got clean, found some of his old unit, started over. He wanted to come tell you himself, but he could not. Why? She whispered. He said the goodbye would be too heavy. There was silence between them. No cars, no people, just the quiet sound of the world holding its breath. The young man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He extended it to her. Anna took it with shaking fingers and unwrapped it slowly. It was a pin, a small silver eagle, globe and anchor, the symbol of the United States Marine Corps. He said to give this to you, the young man said. He called it his last honor, said it belonged with the person who saved him. She stared at the pin. For a moment, her vision blurred. The weight of what she held was heavier than it looked. When she looked up to ask more, the Marine was already stepping back. Wait, she called out. Do you know his name? He paused, then shook his head slowly. We only knew his call sign. Ghost. And with that he nodded once and walked away. Anna stood on the sidewalk for a long time, holding the pin in her palm like a lifeline. Her heart was heavy with questions but also full with something else. Peace. The man with the tired eyes had not disappeared. He had returned to the world. She had done what she could. She had fed him. She had seen him. She had believed, even when he could not. And somehow that had been enough. Years would pass after that. She would get married, build a life, travel, laugh, cry, grow older. But in her nightstand drawer, beside a faded photo of her wedding day and a bundle of old birthday cards, there would always be a small piece of cloth with a Marine pin folded inside. And every now and then, when the world felt too cruel, Anna would touch that pin and remember the man who had once sat on a cold bench, invisible to everyone but her. The man who had found his way back, because one woman chose to care when no one else did. And that memory never left her. Not ever. The air smelled of soft lilacs, and the sun had risen with a gentle warmth that made the morning feel almost unreal. Birds chirped just outside the chapel, as if nature itself wanted to be part of this sacred moment. Inside the hall, laughter floated through the corridors, mixed with the rustle of dresses, the shine of polished shoes, and the sweet scent of flowers arranged in perfect symmetry along every pew. Everything was as it should be, or rather everything appeared that way. Anna stood in front of a full-length mirror in a small room near the back of the chapel, holding her breath. Her white dress clung to her figure with a quiet elegance. The veil draped delicately over her shoulders. Makeup touched lightly across her face, not hiding her features but gently accenting them. Her hair had been curled just the way her mother used to do it. She looked radiant. People told her she looked like a dream, like something out of a movie. But inside her chest, her heart beat with a quiet storm. She was not nervous about Daniel. Not about saying yes. He was everything she had hoped for. Steady, kind, patient in ways she did not always deserve. What trembled inside her was something else, something far older. A whisper from the past, an echo she thought had faded. It had been years since she last saw the man on the bench, the former Marine with the haunted eyes. And though time had passed, the memory of him remained sharp, like a scar that never faded, only softened at the edges. She still thought about him sometimes, especially during quiet moments when the world stopped spinning for just a second. He had vanished and then in a single breath had returned to her life through a stranger who delivered a single pin and the weight of 1,000 untold stories. She had carried that moment with her ever since. Now, as she looked into her own reflection, she whispered softly, "I hope you are safe. I hope you know I never forgot." A knock came at the door. Her father stepped in, smiling with teary eyes, and offered his arm. It was time. The doors of the chapel opened slowly, and the soft hum of the piano filled the space like morning light, spilling into a dark room. Every head turned as Anna stepped forward, her father beside her, guiding her gently down the aisle. Faces smiled, phones lifted, tears welled up across generations. Daniel stood at the altar, his eyes wide and full of quiet awe. He had seen her in 100 different ways, at her worst, at her silliest, at her most honest, but never like this, never with that glow. As she reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Daniel's, and she smiled. The priest began the ceremony, voice warm, practiced, steady. Anna tried to focus, but her heart beat strangely. Not from fear, from something else, something unspoken. Just as she and Daniel joined hands, just as the priest turned the page in his book and prepared to speak the vows that would bind two lives together forever, the heavy wooden doors at the end of the chapel creaked open. At first, no one turned. The music did not stop. The priest kept speaking, but then came the sound. Boots against polished marble. Not rushed, not loud, just steady, measured, intentional. One by one, heads began to turn. Rows of guests twisted in their seats. The pianist faltered, his fingers freezing over the keys. The priest stopped mid-sentence, words hanging in the air like unfinished prayers. 12 men entered. Each one wore the full dress uniform of the United States Marine Corps, their coats crisp, their shoulders square, medals shining against dark fabric. They walked in perfect unison, the line unbroken, eyes forward. Faces solemn. Gasps echoed through the chapel. A child whispered, "Who are they?" No one answered. Anna turned, frozen in place. Her breath caught in her throat. They marched down the center aisle slowly, not stopping, not speaking. Guests parted slightly, unsure of what was happening, unsure whether this was part of the ceremony. But deep down, everyone knew. This was no performance. This was something real. The leader, a tall man with silver in his hair, and the quiet confidence of someone who had seen war and survived it, stepped forward once they reached the altar. The rest remained behind him, forming a perfect line across the aisle. He looked at Anna, not smiling, not speaking yet. Then he reached into the inside of his uniform and pulled out an envelope. It was small, simple, aged with creases and softened edges. A note that had clearly been folded and refolded too many times. With both hands, he extended it to her. Anna did not move for a moment. Her hands were shaking. Daniel stepped aside gently. She took the envelope with trembling fingers, eyes wide and locked onto the stranger's. He gave a slow, respectful nod. She opened the letter. The paper inside was yellowed at the corners. The handwriting was neat but heavy, like someone had written each word with great care. She read aloud, her voice quiet but strong. "Thank you for feeding me when I was invisible. I was once a Marine, I lost everything. Your kindness brought me back, I returned to base, got help, I found my brothers again. I told them about the woman who saved me without asking anything. This is our salute to you, Semper Fi." The letter fell from her hand. Her knees gave way and she dropped down to the marble floor, her veil pooling around her like a wave. Her hand went to her mouth, eyes wide with emotion, tears falling silently. The room had fallen completely silent. No one moved. The priest stepped back. The Marine stood tall. Then slowly, in perfect harmony, they raised their right hands in a salute. 12 men, 12 arms, 12 silent tributes, not to a bride, not to a ceremony, but to a moment of humanity that had once happened on a cold city bench, unnoticed by the world. Anna sobbed quietly, overcome by the weight of it all, the weight of what one kind act had meant, the weight of the fact that he had remembered, that he had lived, that he had sent his brothers in arms to say what he himself could not. Daniel knelt beside her, placing a hand on her back. He did not ask questions. He did not speak. He only stood beside the woman he loved and let her feel everything. One of the Marines stepped forward and gently placed the letter back into her lap, then touched 2 fingers to his forehead in a quiet goodbye. Then, as quickly as they had come, the 12 turned and walked out in the same formation, not waiting for applause, not pausing for cameras. Their duty was done. The doors closed behind them, and the chapel remained silent. It took nearly a minute before anyone spoke. And even then the words were hushed, reverent. The priest, now holding back his own emotion, stepped forward and cleared his throat softly. "Shall we continue?" he asked, his voice slightly cracked. Anna nodded. Still on her knees, she looked up at Daniel, eyes full of something he could only describe as grace. "Yes," she whispered. "Now we can." And the ceremony continued, but nothing about the day was the same after that. Later at the reception, people would speak about it in hushed tones. Some cried, some smiled through tears. Others simply sat, unsure of how to put into words what they had just witnessed. But Anna never tried to explain. She did not need to. She had lived a story no one else could fully understand. A story that had crossed time and pain, silence and salvation. A story that had started with a paper bag on a bench and ended with a military salute on her wedding day. And she carried it with her, not for attention, not for admiration, but as a reminder that kindness is never wasted, that even the smallest act can ripple into something extraordinary, that sometimes the invisible man becomes a hero again, because someone once saw him. The day after the wedding, sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains of their hotel room, casting delicate patterns on the floor. Anna sat silently on the edge of the bed, still in her robe, staring at the letter she had read the day before. It now rested gently on her lap, its creases more pronounced, its weight somehow heavier. Daniel, freshly awake, walked over with 2 mugs of coffee but said nothing. He knew this moment belonged to her. The world outside was moving on. Cars passed. Birds chirped. Somewhere, someone was probably posting pictures from the reception, smiling faces, the cake, the dancing. But Anna's mind remained fixed on 12 silent men, their boots tapping across a polished floor, and one unforgettable gesture of respect that had stolen the breath of everyone in the room. Unbeknownst to her, one of the guests, an old college friend, had taken a single photo, a candid, no flash, no framing, just truth. Anna, knees on marble, tear-streaked face in her hands, surrounded by the 12 Marines, their uniforms like pillars of honor. The moment looked like something out of a painting. The photo made its way online that night. No caption, no context, just the raw power of stillness and meaning. By morning it had begun to travel. At first it was passed between friends. Then it landed on the page of a military family support group. From there a news anchor picked it up, and then another. By evening, the image had made its way to national broadcasts. It flashed on television screens between stories of politics and economics, a brief pause from chaos to remind people what compassion looked like. Commentators asked, who was the bride? Why were the Marines there? What did they say? But no one had full answers, just pieces. A few whispers from wedding guests. A vague account that someone once called the most beautiful mystery in a decade. The silence around the story only made it more powerful. By the next day, Anna's phone buzzed constantly. Journalists, producers, influencers asking for interviews. They offered money, exposure, contracts, even book deals. But she refused them all, every single one. To her, that moment had never belonged to the media. It belonged to something purer, something that words on a screen could never capture. She did not want to explain it. She wanted to preserve it. In the weeks that followed, strangers began sending letters. Veterans from Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. Some wrote of battles, of scars. No one could see of kindnesses they had never spoken of. Others simply thanked her for reminding the world that one person's quiet choice could echo louder than any speech. Anna read every letter. She responded to none, but she kept them all. There were mothers who wrote her too. One letter came from a woman in Georgia whose son had died in combat. She wrote, "I used to worry people had forgotten boys like mine. After I saw your wedding, I slept through the night for the first time in months." Another letter came from a homeless veteran in Chicago. He wrote in crooked lines on old stationery, "You gave one of us hope. I saw it. And now I'm trying again." Anna folded that letter gently and placed it with the first one, the one the Marines had given her. She kept both in a drawer beside her bed. On difficult nights when the world felt too heavy or the news too loud, she would pull them out and sit with them in silence. She did not cry. She just remembered. She never saw the man from the bench again. Not once. He had disappeared as quietly as he had arrived in her life. But in her heart, he never really left. She often wondered where he was, whether he had found peace, whether he had seen the photo that had gone around the world, whether he knew what his brothers had done on his behalf. But she never searched for him. She did not need to. Some connections live beyond distance, beyond words, beyond time. Every year on her wedding anniversary, she returned to the place where it all began. The bench outside the bakery, just across from the rusted old fountain, tucked between two brick buildings the city had long forgotten. She would go early in the morning when the streets were quiet and the sun had barely begun to rise, and she would leave a brown paper bag, same as she used to. Inside, a sandwich, a bottle of water, a small chocolate, and a folded napkin with 5 words scribbled in her neat handwriting. "You were never invisible, ever." Then she would walk away. Sometimes the bag would be gone by evening. Other times it remained untouched. She never looked back. She never waited. It was not about being seen. It was about remembering. It was about honoring a promise she had never spoken aloud. Kindness, once given, does not need witnesses. It lives on quietly, passing from one heart to another. It becomes part of who we are as years passed. The photo from the wedding remained in circulation. It resurfaced on military holidays. It hung on the wall of a Marine Corps recruitment center in North Carolina. It was printed in a classroom for a lesson on empathy. It found its way into a sermon. It was framed in a cafe run by veterans. But Anna never framed it in her home. She did not need the reminder. She lived it. Daniel understood this deeply. He never tried to make her forget. Never asked questions about the man on the bench. He knew his wife's heart had room for many stories, many memories, and he knew that this one, in particular, had shaped the very soul he had fallen in love with. Together, they built a quiet life. They had 2 daughters, both with Anna's curious eyes and Daniel's calm demeanor. When they grew old enough to ask about the wedding photo, the one that hung not in their home but in their school, they came home one afternoon and asked, "Mom, why were there soldiers at your wedding?" Anna smiled, took a deep breath, and told them the story in full, not with drama, not with tears, but with grace. She told them about a time when she gave someone lunch every Thursday because it was right. About how one man, buried in silence and shame, had found the strength to rise again not through speeches or therapy or fanfare, but through the steady, unnoticed kindness of one stranger who never asked for anything in return. She told them about the moment he came back, about the Marines, about the letter. And then she said the words that would stay with them forever. You never know what your kindness can become. Sometimes it becomes a miracle. Other times it becomes a legacy. But it is never wasted. Her daughters nodded. They were too young to fully understand. But they would carry the story. And someday, they would tell it again. And so, the salute that echoed through the wedding hall became more than just a moment frozen in a photograph. It became a quiet anthem passed from person to person, a living, breathing truth, that in a world chasing noise, the quietest gestures often mean the most, that in a world focused on taking, the act of giving changes everything, and that the greatest heroes are sometimes the ones sitting alone on benches waiting for someone to see them again. Anna never called herself a hero, but the world knew better. And in her heart, she carried the deepest truth of all. I gave a man lunch. He gave me a miracle.